I was aware something had happened. All I recall is a sense of, oh no, foot going towards a brake and realised I was doing I didn't know, but I was doing 300, just shy of 320 miles an hour. So brakes not really doing anything. What had happened is the front tyre had delaminated and blown. The car had skewed right and was going off the road, but it was still doing 290 miles an hour as it started to roll. I'd pulled the lever for the parachute. It was never going to stop it. So then it went over. And I just thought, well, I'm going to die now.
I know my timing's not the best, but if you could like and subscribe and leave a comment, that would be a massive help. Cheers, geezers.
Richard Hammond, who presents the BBC's popular Top Gear programme, is in a critical condition tonight at Leeds Royal Infirmary. He was seriously injured in a crash while filming a new edition of Top Gear.
According to reports, Richard Hammond seemed to hit the brakes and steer into the skid, which aligned with the instincts of a highly competent driver or fighter pilot. However, even though he pulled the parachute release, the parachute didn't have enough time to deploy, and the car veered off the road onto the grass and rolled several times. In the process of deceleration, Richard Hammond's head sloshed around, causing frontal lobe bleed as the roll cage dug into the ground and the top of Richard Hammond's helmet was dragged along the ground. Richard resigned himself to the reality he might die, as it looked like a vampire might take another life.
I found it interesting that there was no fear associated with that. There was no, oh no! There was genuinely, it was answering a question that kind of at the back of my mind I'd always wondered. And I think a lot of us do, all of us. When am I going to die? How? Why? And it was like, oh, it's now. That's the answer. That's the next thing to do. That was it.
The car had no roof, and so it's theorised that had Richard been taller, he might have been decapitated. So yeah, it pays off to be a short geezer for once. Get in. According to reports, Richard Hammond freed himself and was found standing at the site of the crash. However, Hammond has no memory of this. I've also heard some conflicting reports, one that the paramedic geezers heard an unconscious Hammond among the wreckage and felt a pulse, and the car was then turned the right way up and he was cut free. Nevertheless, he was put in a neck brace and then on a stretcher and then taken by air ambulance to a neurological specialist unit at Leeds General Infirmary. His family, as well as members of the Top Gear team, including Clarkson and May, rushed to his bedside.
I didn't actually know the details of the accident, and when I was driving, it came on the radio that he'd flipped and rolled in this car, and I thought, oh, you know, I knew he had an accident. I had no idea.
Serious it was.
No.
And then we got up there, and he was lying there looking bad. And then we just had to wait and wait and wait. Totally out of our depth.
It was horrid. It was horrid when I went up to see him and he was lying there.
Among Top Gear fans, Clarkson, May and Hammond had become beloved, and were not necessarily thought of in the way that many celebrities are. There were no airs or graces, they never dressed up or tried to portray themselves as better than the audience, they never held their tongue, and they never tried to be anyone but themselves. In some sense, the audience felt like they knew them. So when one of them was fighting for their life, it felt like a friend was in trouble. This was evident by the millions of pounds that was donated by fans to the Yorkshire Air Ambulance that airlifted him, and the 10,000 messages of support received by the BBC website as fans waited for news on the man they came to know as the Hamster. A day after the accident, when the smoke cleared, the doctor revealed he had a serious brain injury, but they were reasonably optimistic about his recovery.
I was rushed up there to go and see him and he was reading Auto Trader.
So he was awake and all together?
Yeah, it's fine.
Hammond was responding well to conversations and was able to smile at Clarkson joking about his driving ability.
We just said to him, could you go to York, to an airfield, drive in a straight line and come back again? And he made a mess of it. He's just an incompetent driver.
To cheer Hammond's wife up, Clarkson would send her a funny message every day for 5 weeks. Which does sound like a nice gesture, but in reality probably would grate you a little bit. A mere 30 hours after his crash, Hammond was able to take his first steps as he walked to go to the toilet. Reports are unconfirmed whether it was a number 1 or 2. His head injury reverted Hammond to a childlike state as he became obsessed with top trumps and Lego. In that case, James May should probably get his head checked as well then. So should I, to be fair. Now at some point in all of this, he found time to get himself in a 2-week coma, but from all the sources I read, listened to and watched, I can't really get a clear timeline on exactly when he was in the coma, so yeah, at some point he was in a coma for 2 weeks. On the Glasgow Coma Scale, the most widely accepted measurement of the severity of a coma, which ranges from 15 being the least severe down to 3, which is the most severe, linked to unresponsiveness and a dangerously high mortality rate, Richard was at 3, which is bad, very bad. His condition was serious. In a morphine dream, Richard Hammond went to his happy place, a nice tree on a hill in the Lake District. And in this dream, he was chilling there and he seemed peaceful, seemed to be at ease there.
And all the doctors were looking at everything, and everybody was starting to get a bit worried, and they do these obs where they sort of pinch them or try and get a response. Nothing was happening.
Yeah, I was walking up the hill towards a tree and I grew increasingly conscious that, I'm going to be in trouble for carrying on.
And I looked at her and I thought, this isn't good. And I said, what's that? And I said, is there anything I can do? And she said, if you can think of anything, do it. And I said, well, I could shout at him, because I never shouted at him. And so and I swore a bit.
And then as I reached the tree, it was a very clear, oh no, I really am going to be in trouble. I better go back. And that's the point. I just related that story as a unit to Mindy. And it was very clear when I was brought out of coma shortly after. And that's when it happened.
I hope my happy place is in a specific region of Amsterdam. Even after Hammond came out of his coma, he had post-traumatic amnesia for weeks following the crash, stating he had a 1-minute memory. However, he would go on to make a miraculous recovery. He did sustain some long-term effects, such as having to write down memories, having to work hard to recall memories, and the trauma of now liking celery. However, he did retain his ability to memorise and develop scripts, and he was still very quick-witted. He still had the same sense of humour and personality.
My working memory is very large, my sort of processing memory in the moment, so I can still read a page of script and deliver it. But my longer term, not brilliant.
Series 9 of Top Gear was scheduled to air in October. However, after the crash, there were rumours that Top Gear would be axed, as detractors called for the show's cancellation. But on the 6th of October, the BBC announced that the show would go ahead, only when Hammond made a full recovery. Series 8 of Top Gear would see the show win its first National Television Award for Most Popular Factual Programme, an award it would retain for the following 2 years. This would also be the 3rd year that Top Gear were nominated but failed to win a BAFTA, but never mind that. During the award speech, they paid tribute to Hammond and joked about his driving.
I told you if one of us had a car accident, we'd win this. The good news is they've set this up for Hammond, haven't they? Yeah. He's fine, he's completely fixed. The doctors say he's just got to get a little bit better before he's allowed to come in front of flashbulbs and what have you. This will cheer him up.
In December, Hammond would return to film studio segments for the show, and that month he would also go on the Jonathan Ross show.
Do you think your insurance rate's going to go up on your car? Do you think they're going to...
It hasn't. Kid you not, it hasn't. We've already checked that. I checked it fairly soon after I got home.
As soon as you got out?
Yeah. Have you had any crashes in the last 12 months? Bit.
And then, on the 28th of January 2007, Top Gear would return to our screens. In just 4 months since his accident, Richard Hammond was back.
So it gives me really great pleasure, because I didn't think I'd ever be saying this at one point. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Richard Hammond!
No fuss. No, sorry, girl. Sorry. Sorry, girl. Sorry. Good say no fuss.
4 months, fuck me. See that, Raul Jimenez? That's how you recover from a head injury.
That was the most embarrassing thing I've ever had to do.
Well, I wouldn't say that to any of the people who've just had to jump off a Boeing 737 at Luton.
However, there were still some major questions hanging over the show. Like, after such a traumatic and life-changing incident, would the show be the same? Would it return to the previous level of popularity and acclaim that it had achieved previously? Well, the answer was no. The show would get a whole lot bigger. The premiere of Season 9 opened to 8.13 million viewers. Top Gear easily finished top of the viewership table for its time slot, pissing all over its competition, which included the Celebrity Big Brother 5 final, which was big news in its own right. For more on that, check out my Big Brother Part 2 video. That evening's episode of Top Gear also topped BBC Two's top 30 most viewed programmes for that week. From this point on, Top Gear would cement itself as a fully fledged phenomenon. The series in total would average 7.45 million viewers, and although it was only 6 episodes, what a series it was. In episode 1, we'd get the much anticipated footage of Hammond's crash, as he gave everyone a play-by-play of the crash in detail. And still, somehow, this managed to be hilarious, which is another testament to the talent of the presenters. On any other show, they'd probably take this moment to be really emotional and to cry and all of that, like they do on Celebs Go Dating every 5 minutes. Not Top Gear. They kept it funny without betraying the seriousness of the incident. Also in that episode, they would try to tarmac a road in 24 hours rather than the usual week that it would normally take. This, of course, resulted in the havoc that you would imagine as James May was put in charge of rerouting the traffic.
Ignore the sign, it's wrong. This is Bidford, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you wanted to get back to there...
Yeah, past an industrial estate, there's a little mini roundabout.
Turn right up George's Elm Lane.
George's Elm Lane, which is the first on the right.
It wouldn't surprise me if the traffic jams still weren't resolved to this day. The series would see James May reach top speeds in a Bugatti Veyron. James and Richard would make a space shuttle out of a Reliant Robin. The presenters each bought a tractor and put it through a series of tests, which included an absolute bonkers drag race. They would also use these tractors to grow biofuel. Jeremy makes a PSA about level crossings. All 3 presenters each make a stretch limousine, culminating in them driving 3 celebrities to the Brit Awards.
Do you ever remember giving me a lift?
Where's this conversation going?
You made a car out of, and you stuck like about 7 minis together, and you gave me a lift to the Brits. Do you remember that?
I do.
And when I had to speak to you on a phone that was attached to your head, it was the weirdest, awful, scariest journey ever.
If you haven't seen Top Gear, not a lot of this is going to make any sense.
Well, they drove 2 of them. One of them got lost because, you know, James was driving.
You've picked me up, you've driven me round and round in circles in London, been past Harrods 1,100 times now. Left, you're telling me to go right. I'm not taking this anymore. Just open this damn door. I'm thinking. Find out loud.
Don't worry, mate, you didn't win any awards that night anyway. They also went to America.
We went to Alabama, Florida to film that Fly Drive film, and that was going to be a 25-minute film. We come back with too much material, and I go, well, let's make the whole show out of it.
A special.
Specials are born.
These specials would go on to be an annual tradition and would be the highlight of any festive programming schedule. Well, royal family too. Another tradition of these specials that they started here was the presenters messing up each other's cars. This also marked the start of the tradition of crashing into the back of James May's car. In this special, each presenter had to buy a car for no more than £1,000 to see if it was cheaper to buy a car rather than rent on a US road trip, as they went from Miami to New Orleans, being set a series of challenges along the way. This special would also see the first of Stig's many cousins.
All we know is he's not the Stig, but he is the Stig's American cousin. But he is the Stig's lorry-driving cousin. He's the Stig's Chinese cousin. It's the Stig's teenage cousin.
Another tradition of these specials that started here was changing the presenters and the crew's name in the credits, which if you watch them you'll see have been changed to stereotypical American Southern names for this special. However, what this special might perhaps best be known for was the presenters almost getting killed at a petrol station. This was due to the challenge where each presenter was set the task of trying to get each other shot or arrested by painting a series of messages and slogans on each other's cars. This might not be the smartest idea when going through not the most peaceful place in not the most peaceful country where guns are legal.
They've shot their own sign. What are they going to do to us?
This challenge was the brainchild of Richard Porter, who was drinking cocktails in New York at the time when this was going down. So, at least he's safe.
Now, are y'all gay looking to see how long it takes to get beat up in a hick town?
When they attempted to refuel at a gas station, they ended up getting pelted with rocks and getting chased out of there. As well as the presenters' lives being in danger, so were the film crew, who had to resort to using their camera phones to film the rest of the segment. By the way, look how bad camera phones were in 2007. They've come a long way. Needless to say, the presenters succeeded in their challenge, and they did almost get each other killed. Now, while antagonising the locals and putting your lives at risk are rites of passage for Brits abroad, this was perhaps one of the moments where the show took things a bit too far. Definitely not the only moment though.
And then this police ranger geezer sort of put his sirens on and found us like 5-6 miles away. He could see the slogans and the rednecks all fucked off in these pickups, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And we were like, "Oh, well, it's really funny. We thought we'd like," you're explaining something that's gone wrong and it isn't funny at all anymore, and your sort of sentences die out. And he went, "Look out there," and he like pointed at the hills, and it really was the hills have eyes. And he was like, "If you're taken into there, I cannot protect you. Now get out of the fucking state."
This special was also controversial for a scene where Clarkson had to find dinner for the evening, and what he came back with was a whole dead cow on his roof. This received 91 complaints to Ofcom. However, the BBC did make clear that by the time they were filming, the cow was already brown bread. They also didn't at any point say during the programme that they killed the cow. They in fact said that it was found at the side of the road. I mean, I'm more concerned about who's doing these cow drive-bys. What's going on there? The climax of this special saw the presenters ditch the intended task of selling their cars in an effort to recoup the £1,000, but instead giving them away when they were met with the devastation that happened due to Hurricane Katrina. Well, I mean, James tried to, but he couldn't even give it away. Don't worry, mate, I know your pain. 7 years. This served as a great example of how Top Gear would take a break from the levity to shine a light on very serious issues. Also, when not on air, Top Gear would do its bit for foundations like Make-A-Wish. And Top Gear weren't finished doing their bit for charity. Part of the original plan of Red Nose Day 2007 was to air a special version of A Question of Sport called A Question of Comedy. However, one of the guests was Jade Goody, and if you've seen my videos on Big Brother, check them out, like and subscribe please, you'll understand why that was a problem. And if you haven't seen those videos, then why don't you watch them? Why are you trying to hurt me like this? Come on geezers, check them out. To cut a long story short, Jade Goody was caught in a race row, so she was no longer the nation's sweetheart, and so airing A Question of Comedy wasn't really a good look for the BBC, so they ditched the show. That meant the BBC needed a replacement. So they approached Top Gear, which they've been doing for years, but Top Gear had always said that they were too busy. Well, actually, the Top Gear team did do something for Sport Relief in 2004. They made a spin-off show called Stars in Fast Cars, which would actually see them try out some ideas that they would use on future Top Gear episodes. It would also feature an appearance by Tiff Nadell. Good to see you, geezer, you're looking good. The success of this one-off special led the BBC to making this into a series that ran for 10 episodes. Well, I mean, it wasn't so successful that anyone mentioned it in any interviews or any of the Top Gear books or any of the articles really written about Top Gear, so I've actually had to go back and do a re-record and put it in here, but never mind. So apart from that, in 2004, Top Gear always said that they were too busy to film something for comic relief. However, this time the BBC approached them with an idea that just by the title alone you couldn't say no to, and that was Top Gear of the Pops. This was a great bit of television.
What the fuck is this? And they haven't put him on at the wrong speed. He said he wanted to borrow a hoe. Or maybe he's a farmer.
Jeremy pulling the plug on Lethal Bizzle mid-song and calling him Jizzy Tissue. That was amazing.
You don't want to pay, mister. I'm gonna take your friend and explicit. What are you doing?
The trio being put in charge of the special effects for a performance by Supergrass and Ade Edmonds and just completely ruining it. That was incredible. And the culmination of the show, a performance by the Top Gear band with Justin Hawkins on lead vocals. James was on keyboard, Richard on bass, and Jeremy was on drums.
I dropped the sticks. Well, your hands sometimes crash into each other.
Well, if you didn't have so many drums.
I've got another packet here.
Well, he sort of was on drums. He tried. After this, the three of them would actually reform the Top Gear band in various locations. Their instruments were left unsupervised. I don't think Justin Hawkins was often on vocals. Top to bottom, aside from seeing Jimmy Savile in the opening credits, this was incredible. Give it a watch if you've not seen it. Fantastic.
And that...
I'm sorry, mate.
What is it now?
Well, I'll tell you what it is now. The only person who cares how many records Akon has sold is Akon. All we're bothered about, bearing in mind how horrible modern music is, how quickly they get the song over with. So I've come up with a new chart, and here it is. At number 3, it's Kelly's featuring someone with a name they weren't christened with, and a little star at 3 minutes 14 seconds.
On the 25th of July, we got perhaps the most intense and dangerous Top Gear special ever, the Polar Special. The Special would comprise of a race to the magnetic North Pole between Jeremy Clarkson and James May in a modified Toyota 4x4 against Richard Hammond riding on a sledge being pulled by a pack of 10 husky dog geezers. He also had help from explorer Matty McNair. This race would quickly turn into a quest for survival, as they made the 400-mile journey manoeuvring through boulder fields, trying not to plunge to their death through wafer-thin ice, and trying not to succumb to the lethally low temperatures.
So forgive me, but there's only a very remote chance that either of us, any of us, make it.
Yes. Yes, it's really a question of what death do you fancy most?
Do you want to be polar bear poo or fish poo?
The sitting in the car, desperately scrabbling at the windows trying to get out, while... What did we decide? Would we freeze to death or drown first?
I think we will freeze to death in the act of drowning.
This was probably the most intense Top Gear special, and by the looks of it, it seemed like the least fun to film. I'm actually surprised that James and Jeremy didn't actually try and kill each other.
We had a doctor in our team just to keep an eye on us, and I remember right at the end she sat me in the little communal tent that we put up where we all huddle around this tiny little stove which has got like a match burning in it. And she said, so James, you know, will your life be better or worse for this experience? And I decided that it would be worse because occasionally I'd remember it.
He's been practising his face he's going to pull when he dies. That's one of them. Try another. He has.
He's worked out
his faces, all the different faces.
The thing about death out here is that once you're dead, you freeze. I want my body to be found wearing the appropriate expression.
While no one froze to death, the show did find itself in some hot water, as environmentalists weren't pleased with the damage that they had done to the North Pole while driving around in a 4x4. I mean, from the looks of it there, it seems fine. Can't see any tyre marks. As a protest, environmentalists dumped manure outside of Jeremy Clarkson's house, which is a proper shit situation. The BBC also received several complaints about the fact that James and Jeremy were drinking gin while driving. And while you don't want to promote drinking and driving, there was some extenuating circumstances in this situation. I mean, I don't know what other cars they were going to hit. The BBC, who usually defend Top Gear in these kind of situations, did uphold these complaints. The special concluded abruptly with Hammond not even finishing, as he'd already well and truly lost the race by that point. The conditions were so brutal that the three presenters immediately headed back home on snowplanes when filming was finished. However, the crew had to go back the way they came on that 400-mile journey. And this is a good time to shout out the crew, who might be the unsung heroes of Top Gear, as they had to go on all these journeys with the team and risk their lives just as the presenters did. They also had to come up with ever more innovative and creative ways to beautifully film the antics that we see on screen. I always thought that being part of the Top Gear team would be one of the best jobs on TV, but in instances like this, it could also be one of the worst. While I'm here, the in-office team as well deserves some love, as they had to deal with the logistical nightmare that these shoots would entail. Series 10 saw the presenters start off in sunnier climes as they tried to find the best driving road in the world in 3 supercars. Also in the series, they did amphibious cars too, where they had to try and cross the channel. This was fantastic, definitely watch this. Jeremy drives the smallest car in the world around the BBC offices. James and Jeremy looked for the earliest example of what we'd call a modern car, which is a lot more interesting than it actually sounds. The cheap car challenge saw them each buy a British Leyland car for under £1,200. James and Richard did caravan racing. In a very tense and dramatic episode, James, Jeremy and Richard and the Stig would compete in a 24-hour race at Silverstone.
This is, without any question or shadow of doubt, the scariest thing I've ever done.
Yes, I've broken my hip.
This series also saw all 4 of them compete in a race across London James in a car, Richard by bike, Jeremy on a boat, and Stig by public transport. Midway through the series, we got the amazing Botswana Special, as they had to drive cars bought for under £1,500 across the whole of Botswana. This special had lots of great moments, like the presenters doing wildlife commentary and getting distracted by a geezer's comb over, and Richard's love affair with his Opel Kadett, Oliver. He's not giving this car away to the locals at the end of the special.
Director called action. I drove the car into the river, and once they pulled the car out, the crew said, "Rich, you are so cool. You even remembered to cut the cameras before you got out." No, I hadn't started the cameras before the stunt. We had to do it again with a rope. But Oliver was there with me. It's bonding.
This special would see the addition of the backup car, which would serve as a punishment to any presenter who broke down and couldn't continue with their car. To be a suitable punishment, the backup car would always be something the presenters hated and would be embarrassed for them to be seen in. In this case, it was the Volkswagen Beetle. Top Gear really was on a crest of a wave. The show was so popular you couldn't move in shops for Top Gear merchandise. In December in particular, it would flood the high streets. A lot of it would flood the charity shops and discount bins by January, but never mind that. A further mark of the show's popularity is that in July of that year, it was revealed by Autoblog that the audience waiting list for the show was 336,000 people strong, which works out to approximately be 21 years long. 21 years. Still not as long as the queue for Oasis tickets, but it's impressive. Outside of the show, the presenters were also popping up all over the gaff.
My star client disappears off the face of the earth. How do you think I'm doing?
Harv, I can explain.
I'm doing great. You're everywhere. Radio, TV, papers. You can't buy this kind of publicity. I mean, what do you need me for? Oh, that is just a figure of speech, obviously.
Everything they touched seemed to turn to gold. Or rubble and ashes. And that brings us to one of the best TV crossovers, no, one of the best bits of TV in history, no, one of the best bits of footage in the history of recorded moving pictures, Top Ground Gear Force.
I mean, gardening. How hard can it be?
Well, I should imagine very hard.
Well, we're going to find out. This is the team. There's Handy Hammond, James E. Dimmock, May, and then we've got some poles who'll actually do all the work. Anyway, let's get cracking.
Basically, Top Gear doing ground force. This, as a kid, is where I started watching Top Gear, as this had me gasping for air through laughter. So if you haven't seen it, there was a show called Ground Force. Killer theme song, great premise, everyone loved it. Well, not everyone, it's not on anymore. The show would involve the host doing a makeover of someone's garden, and then when these geezers they used to have back in the day called homeowners returned, they'd revealed a renovated garden. And they'd be in tears and all of that. It was lovely. However, by 2008, the show was not on TV. So for that year's Sport Relief, which Hammond was one of the hosts of, why not bring it back? And why not let the Top Gear team have a go? Well, the recipient of this garden makeover, 5-time Olympic gold medalist Sir Steve Redgrave, was about to find out. And just to let you know, he wasn't in on it. I always thought that he was, I thought he had to be, but no, honestly, he was kept in the dark. He was also very proud of his garden. Over the course of 8 hours, Hammond, Clarkson and May set about destroying the garden in the most ludicrous ways possible.
I've got my crane stuck, is what I've done.
I've got to lift it. No! Hammond, you idiot, man! Honestly!
That'll buff out.
No member of the Sir Steve Redgrave family plays rugby.
Well, I'll be able to then.
Well, actually they won't.
So there you are. This is your new garden.
In my opinion, this is where Red Nose Day / Sport Relief peaked. Again, if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's fantastic. This also served as further proof of how good the character dynamic between Hammond, Clarkson and May was. Like all great comedy teams, put them in any scenario and it will work. And here, taken out of a motoring scenario altogether, it still works. I can't go on enough about how good this is. Check it out.
Hermalis intermedia palladia. Presumably that's Latin for dead twig in some mud. So what's alive that I could have?
You want
There's no point paying for daffodils, just go and nick those from a roundabout.
Right.
I've been sent to get plants, but I just don't know, other than Gorgon's, what's it called? Gonorrhea.
Tree ferns?
Have you got any syphilis?
2008 would also mark the start of Top Gear's live shows. Prior to this, Top Gear took part in the MPH show, but now the Top Gear brand name was so valuable that they had a show all by themselves. Series 11 saw some more of Top Gear's best moments. Hammond, Clarkson and May had a go at creating their own police cars for under £1,000. They also had to buy an Alfa Romeo for under £1,000.
OK, I've got an alternator failure warning light, brake failure warning light, oil pressure warning light, and the unmistakable sound of a ruined gearbox. And that's what I like about Alfas. No other Alfa in the world has all these problems today. They have different ones.
Richard, along with a hunting party comprised of people on horses and dogs and all of that. People weren't riding the dogs were running beside the horses. They tried to hunt Jeremy Clarkson in a Daihatsu Terios made to look like a fox. The UK Top Gear took on the German motoring show D-Motor in a series of challenges.
James, what are you doing? Shooting at Jeremy. But he's on our side! No, but why wouldn't you? You're right, you would. Fire!
As you can imagine, there were loads of war, football and cultural references. The lads, of course, arrived in Spitfires and that sort of set the tone. They ended up passing off the Stig as James May and ended up winning. Go on England, you can keep all the penalty victories, Germany. This series also saw the race across Japan between Jeremy driving the Nissan GTR against James and Richard riding the bullet train.
Go for it.
Yours.
Which is Japanese for o'clock.
This series was short but was still great. Around this time in 2008 is also where Jeremy Clarkson capitalised on the economic crash and bought a farm at a discount price. So everything was going well. I mean, not for most of the world, but still. However, Clarkson did run into trouble right at the end of the series during the recording of episode 6. Now, since Top Gear returned, BBC Two were already on their third controller. Jane Root left in 2004 to be replaced by Rolly Keatings, who then left in 2008 and was replaced by Janice Hadlow. And during the recording of that episode 6 in series 11, in an untelevised moment, Clarkson made a joke involving a 4-letter word beginning with C. This was something that he'd also done at the recording the week prior. This caused a confrontation between Janice and Jeremy. But in both of these instances, the C word was talking about Gordon Brown, so how mad can you actually get? But all of this is to say, the BBC and Top Gear's relationship was growing less and less harmonious. And what probably didn't help that was the first episode of Series 12, as they immediately started the series with controversy, as in this episode the presenters had a go at being lorry drivers. And it didn't take long for Clarkson to joke about lorry drivers killing prostitutes.
What matters to lorry drivers? Murdering prostitutes?
And then for good measure, he did it again.
Because this is a hard job, and I'm not just saying this to win favour with lorry drivers, it's a hard job. Change gear, change gear, change gear, check your mirrors, murder a prostitute, change gear, murder, check your... That's a lot of effort in a day.
He suddenly says killing a prostitute, as if that's part of a truck driver's normal duties. And in fact, it's said so quickly as part of this piece to camera in the cabin that you actually miss it the first time. You have a think of, what did he say? And you think, oh, it can't have been that.
Jeremy's remark infuriated relatives of women who'd been murdered by Steve Wright and another lorry driver, the Yorkshire Ripper.
Ofcom received 339 complaints about this. However, no fine was handed out to the show. Will Clarkson apologise? Of course not.
Started out in life, his career, with a lorry. So, in fact, the only thing we can be sure he hasn't done is murder a prostitute.
We got support from people in the BBC who would go, the compliance people go, it's okay to get complaints, you just got to be able to defend them, and we were very good at that. And they used us as an example to other programmes to go, push yourselves more. Don't worry about complaints. Complaints are fine as long as you can defend them. And we very, very rarely got an upheld complaint.
In the series, they also got in trouble with Tesla over the review of one of their cars. I don't think many people are shedding any tears for Elon Musk. Tesla tried to sue the BBC for libel after the claims Clarkson made about Tesla in the VT.
This car then really was shaping up to be something wonderful. But then... Although Tesla say it'll do 200 miles, we worked out that on our track it would run out after just 55 miles. And if it does run out, it's not a quick job to charge it up again. OK, to fill the tank on a normal car takes what? A couple of minutes? To fully recharge the batteries in this from a normal 13-amp socket like that takes 16 hours. So to get from here to the top of Scotland would take more than 3 days.
The court ruled against Tesla. However, Top Gear weren't allowed to test drive Teslas after this.
Clarkson's show is much more about entertainment than it is about truth.
This series wouldn't just be remembered for its controversies, as we had some great moments, like the 3 presenters driving American muscle cars to the famous salt flats in Utah. The team also had a go at trying to make a Renault Aventine go as fast as a Mitsubishi Evo X for £9,800. Jeremy responded to an angry letter from a fictional character called Mr. Needham, who was sort of a substitute for all of the people who criticised Top Gear for not involving many sensible cars. Jeremy, in response to this critical letter, attempted to do a sensible road test of a Ford Fiesta, which ended up turning into a chase through a shopping centre.
This can happen. Oh, and it just has.
And a beach assault involving Royal Marines.
Hey, look at that! The smoke grenades fit perfectly in the cup holder.
These sensible road tests would turn out to be a recurring feature, with Jeremy doing 2 more of them over upcoming series. Jeremy and James tried to see if communism ever produced a good car, and we got a race between James, Jeremy and Richard, who tried to get from Basel to Blackpool to turn on the Blackpool lights while only using 1 tank of fuel. While 2 of them tried to do it, Jeremy instead tried to run out of fuel close to his house. The series ended with the Vietnam Special, as the lads had to drive motorbikes rather than cars across Vietnam.
Is this your favourite place in the whole world now? Yeah. Yeah, mine. This is terrifying. It's just bikes absolutely everywhere.
This special was absolutely unreal. As a kid, I had this downloaded on my iPod and I rewatched it so many times. As an 11-year-old, this was my porn. I watched it so many times, I used to see it in my dreams. And I used to see the 2007 Champions League final in my nightmares.
Dot fat dicey key my time tweet.
Dân.
I probably know this special word for word, back to front. It was so good. As they're in Vietnam, most of this special was set to music from classic Vietnam War films. And here might be a good time to mention the show's use of music. It was fucking excellent. The BBC's blanket music licence allowed them to play whatever music they wanted in the catalogues of the PRS and the PPL, which basically means they could use whatever they wanted. And unlike some BBC shows that just throw a barrage of music at the wall for no rhyme or reason, Top Gear put this ability to good use. Growing up, there were so many tunes that I heard for the first time watching this show. No wonder, over the years, they had so many compilation albums. The series' average viewership, once again, rose to above 7 million. 2009 is when the show would proper tour the world, as they performed in several countries. Top Gear wasn't just big in the UK, it was global.
Is this an internet in here?
Yeah, that is.
Why are we in an internet?
Well, because we're going on a Top Gear world tour. It's so massive it would actually be easier to tell them where we're not going.
No, it wouldn't. We're not going to Brazil or Venezuela or Mexico or Canada or the one that's in between or Saudi
That's
Arabia.
going to take
or
forever. Let's just say we are going to London, Birmingham, Dublin, Amsterdam, Cape Town, Johannesburg, Auckland, Sydney, and then later on Hong Kong.
You see? Yeah. That's hardly anywhere. There's about 182 countries we're not going to.
Away from the show, Clarkson continued to court controversy.
Clarkson's description of Gordon Brown as a one-eyed Scottish idiot has been branded offensive by a charity for the blind. Clarkson made the comments in Australia, where he's hosting Top Gear Live, a stage version of the BBC television show.
In England, we have this one-eyed Scottish idiot. I've said that now.
You said that out loud as well, yeah, you have.
Enemies continued to mount against Clarkson, and that meant enemies would continue to mount against Top Gear.
Jeremy Clarkson has 3 daughters, and I hope they all go blind.
Not one of them in one eye, all of them in all their eyes. Come on, it's just a joke like on Top Gear!
But those enemies weren't slowing Top Gear's momentum, as the viewing figures stayed above 7 million for the following series, which featured one of my favourite Top Gear moments as James and Jeremy produced an advert for Volkswagen.
The new Sirocco TDI, for people who value their arms.
One fill of diesel, a 55 mpgs old.
If only he'd waited for the new Scirocco TDI to go on sale. The Scirocco TDI. Life's not so bad.
The army says it's now powerless to prevent the ongoing mass exodus.
Safe to diesel driving, you know you're gonna find it kind of surprising.
Another great challenge from the series saw the lads try to find the perfect car for a teenager, which featured a really great sight gag when in the office. While some might find these sight gags a bit overdone, a bit corny, I really liked them, and these hidden details really made the show rewatchable, which is handy because it did comprise 90% of Dave's output for years. So just before this series, Top Gear got their own exhibition at the UK's National Motor Museum, another marker of how popular the show was. However, was this show coming to an end? as the last episode of Series 13 ended with a particular beautiful VT that sparked a lot of speculation that the show might be over, or that Jeremy might depart the show. However, not to worry, in November they were back, and they were back with a banger of an episode as the lads take a trip to the home of the Dacia Sandero and other things, Romania, as they try to get to the Transfargazen Highway. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah, took 2.5 days to get here in the end. No! Stop!
This series also saw them build an electric car.
I hate it when eco-cars are given a really pious name, like Intelligentsia.
So we want to give it a more aggressive, like Mustang, Tiger, Leopard, Panther.
Or Vixen.
Vixen!
Sadly, though, Jeremy had beaten us to it.
Jeff.
My third favourite Jeff. We get airport vehicle racing, and they also created their own art exhibition. And James was in charge of doing the audio tour guides. You can imagine how that went. In this series, we'd also get the Bolivia Special, where the conditions were so bad they were actually nice to each other for a bit.
Oh, God.
Don't make me laugh.
I've just taken Viagra on top of the Andes.
Yeah.
During the shoot, Andy Willman almost got himself shot as he tried to tell a drug lord to keep his music down. What a mentalist. Thankfully, he didn't get killed, as he wouldn't have been alive to see Top Gear be named the nation's favourite TV show of the decade in a Channel 4 poll.
Oh dear, they're going to be insufferable, aren't they? Well done, Top Gear. Thrilled for you. Bastards.
God, like his head wasn't big enough.
Around about this time also marked the start of Top Gear's long-term partnership with the racing game franchise Forza Motorsport.
It's called the California, and you have to ask, what's the point of it? Certainly, it's not very pretty, and it has literally the worst built-in telephone of any car in the world.
Top Gear also had a partnership with the Gran Turismo series. On top of all of this, April of 2010 would see Clarkson celebrate his 50th birthday with a party attended by more than 100 geezers, including Brian Ferry, Jimmy Carr, Harry Enfield, Dom Jolly, Paul Whitehouse. He also got a message delivered by David Cameron dressed as the Stick, which is probably a sign that your sesh has gone on a bit too long. If you see Cameron with a crash helmet in his hands, time to go home, lads. Anyway, I bring this up to say the show was flying. And oh yeah, remember that rival motoring show that were going to leave Top Gear in the dust? Remember them? Fifth Gear? Well, this was less a WWE WCW ratings war and more of a WWE TNA ratings war, as by this point in time, Fifth Gear was cancelled by Channel 5. Series 15 saw a new reasonably priced car, so they had to have another track day, and we got my fourth favourite page 3 girl, Petter Todd. Other highlights of the series included Jeremy's excellent Reliant Robin VT.
Some of the lost 60,000 moved down south, of course, but many more were wiped out by their three-wheelers.
Clarkson, Hammond and May having a go at building their own motorhomes. Cameron Diaz and Tom Cruise being stars in the reasonably priced car, which was such a big deal that star in the reasonably priced car segment actually ended the show for the first time, although there were claims that their lap times were fixed after Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz both took top spot on the leaderboard. I mean, one after the other, not at the same time. That would have really aroused suspicion. A challenge that I absolutely loved in this series was the British Sports Car Challenge, which turned into something really quite poignant and beautiful.
It was horrible to walk round this industrial wilderness. There were so many memories, so many thoughts of what might have been. There are, of course, good reasons why almost all these great names are gone. But after our journey across the width of Britain, we really couldn't remember what they were.
Even more beautiful still was the tribute to F1 legend Ayrton Senna. This tribute, by the way, isn't on iPlayer, but it's on YouTube if you want to watch it.
Villeneuve was spectacular on a number of occasions. Senna, he was spectacular every single time he got in a car.
Another great series in the bag. And a key element of what made the show great was the Stig. A character that started off a simple racing driver had become a pop culture icon. An expressionless, emotionless man in a white driving suit who under the helmet could be anyone or anything. Over the years, as his presence on the show grew, so did the mystery surrounding his identity. In 2003, shortly after Ben Collins became the Stig, a Sunday Times reporter came across, well, probably stole, a company record which belonged to Ben Collins' company, Collins Autosport, which listed some income received from the BBC for driving services, which had the potential for good long-term prospects for continual earnings. This, of course, raised some suspicions and led that Sunday Times reporter to thinking he was the Stig. When contacted for a comment, Ben said he was going into a tunnel and the story sort of faded. In 2006, must have been quite a big tunnel then, in 2006 the Daily Express said Julian Bailey was the Stig. Then in 2006 Ben Collins' name came up again when Richard Hammond had his vampire crash, as Collins was named in the Health and Safety Executive Report as someone who worked closely with Top Gear as a high-performance driver and consultant. This sparked Auto Trader to name Collins as the Stig, although William Hill were offering 2-to-1 odds on racing driver Russ Swift being the Stig. Over the years, speculation about who was the Stig ran wild. Some said it was F1 world champion Damon Hill, or Michael Schumacher, or Tim Schrick. Some say it was JK from Jamiroquai. Some say it was Tiff Needell from the old Top Gear. Some said there was multiple Stigs. Was Perry McCarthy still the Stig? Who knows? Who knows? While the general public might hear the name Ben Collins and think he was the geezer who made dictionaries, fans who went on forums knew he was the Stig. What didn't help was the man under the helmet would sometimes act like a helmet. In January of 2009, local newspapers in Bristol named Ben Collins as the Stig, after Ben allegedly told two gallery owners, one being Simon Whitehead, that he was the Stig while asking him to produce a limited edition print of the Stig. The Telegraph would pick up the story. A builder, Jason Moody, who did some work for Collins, also knew that he was the Stig, as he saw the white Stig suit. However, none of this was definitive proof that Ben was the Stig, so the mystery remained. And at the time, who was the Stig was one of the internet's most asked questions, just behind how do I return my Michael Jackson tickets. However, the world would soon get an answer to that question, because on the 31st of August, the BBC began their court case to stop the publication of an autobiography from the man known as the Stig. Well, the man playing the Stig. Ben Collins was releasing an autobiography.
I've started to hear rumours about getting other people involved to start doing my job. And I thought, you know, I've been here a long time. Why would I be, why at this stage, should I be slowly phased out? I'd rather be locked in and do more. So I decided it was time to go. So there was a few hints that my time was coming to an end, whether I wanted it to or not. And I thought it was best to go out on my own terms.
The court case was held behind closed doors, with the details being kept secret, because if they didn't keep it secret, then going to court to stop the book coming out would be a bit pointless, wouldn't it? A week later, the verdict from the High Court came in. The BBC had lost, and the book titled The Man in the White Suit by Ben Collins was allowed to be released.
This is the Stig, walking out of court with his head uncovered, a crisp blue suit in place of his white racing gear. Bristolian stuntman and racing driver Ben Collins faced photographers as himself.
Between 2005 and only 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was the Stig. So this other person who's written this presumably extremely thin book about being the Stig for the last 4 weeks has got a bit of a nerve, I'd say.
Ben Collins still has some Stig-like characteristics, remaining silent as he left court. But that won't last long. Now he's free to tell his story.
So now the world knew the stoic, mysterious character with an ever-elusive identity was a geezer called Ben.
The value is in the mystique and the commercial investment that they've put in to try and keep this man's name secret, and from that they can create jokes in the programme, and there's a whole aura about the anonymity of the Stig.
This, for a lot of people, is when the magic of Top Gear sort of started to fade. It's like when you find out the name of your favourite wrestler, or rapper, or porn star. Ben Collins' decision to go public as the Stig affected the team on more than just a creative level, but also on a personal level, and it was seen as a betrayal.
It was a shock. It was horrible, actually, because I liked him, and he came round to my house and had drinks, and all the time he was writing a book. So I feel a bit hurt, really.
We're starting to do some filming next week, and I can't really tell you too much about what we're doing, but there will be...
Driving round to the Stig's house and kicking the windows in.
Episode 1. Driving around to Stig's house and nailing his head to the table. Is one of them. Going and getting our overalls back, because they're not his, they're ours. We only lent them to him.
To add insult to injury, Ben would even join Fifth Gear in 2010.
Yes, I can speak, and it's a massive pleasure to do so. I spent too long trapped inside a stormtrooper's outfit for my liking.
The hurt feelings surrounding the whole saga are on full display in the next Top Gear episode, the standalone special, The East Coast Road Trip.
What are you doing?
Turning him round.
Why?
So I can shoot him in the back, because that's how it's done.
This was actually the first of 2 standalone specials over the festive period, the second being my favourite Top Gear special, my favourite Top Gear episode. It might be one of my favourite TV episodes of all time, the Middle East Special.
When we went through Syria, Jordan, we started in Iraq, we were in countries that were war-torn, only half an hour earlier. So to be in them and be with all the amazing people there, that's when you pinch yourself and you think you're the luckiest human being on the planet.
Everything about this was class. The callbacks.
I was a mouse once in a school nativity play. Explain that. Told you there was a man.
Jeremy thinking that he was Jesus.
There's only 2 fish.
I don't like fish.
Well, I've solved it.
It's a miracle.
That is a miracle. Is that a locust? It's a plague of locusts. It's a sign. This, I think, is somebody saying that I could be the second coming. Think of the initials.
And above all, the ending. A perfect opportunity to introduce a new Stig. Although James's head injury wasn't nice to see. Fair play to him though for doing a Terry Butcher and carrying on.
You are healed. I have healed you.
So Top Gear would go into season 16 with a new Stig. And a new controversy. Because in the second episode of the series, they said this.
Why would you want a Mexican car? Because cars reflect national characteristics, don't they? So German cars are sort of very well built and ruthlessly efficient. Italian cars are a bit flamboyant and quick. Mexican cars just going to be a lazy, feckless, flatulent open that stops, leaning against a fence asleep, looking at a cactus with a blanket with a hole in the middle on as a coat.
It's interesting because they can't do food, the Mexicans, can they? Because it's all like sick with cheese on it. I mean,
refried sick.
Yeah, refried sick.
Needless to say, people were offended.
But now a former guest on the show, the comedian Steve Coogan, who often attracts controversy himself, has launched an attack on the Top Gear presenters. Writing in The Observer, he says, with Top Gear, it is three rich, middle-aged men laughing at poor Mexicans.
The worst part of it was when he said, imagine waking up in the morning and being Mexican.
I'm sorry, but just imagine waking up and remembering you're Mexican.
I thought, wow, you know, if you replace that with various other words like Palestinian or Israeli, you know, people would be losing their minds.
It'd be brilliant. It'd be brilliant because you could just go straight back to sleep again. Oh, I'm a Mexican. I'm a Mexican.
All I'm going to do all day.
That's why we're not going to get any complaints about this, because the Mexican embassy, the ambassador's going to be sitting there with a remote control like this. They won't complain.
Well, he was wrong, and the Mexican ambassador to the UK wrote a formal complaint to the BBC, who removed the footage from subsequent broadcasts. Jeremy Clarkson even apologised to the Mexican ambassador personally.
If we got into trouble and we were in the papers, it was kind of charming trouble. Sometimes we fucked up and it was like, you stupid, but like Mexico was just awful. That was shameful what we did because we were too full of ourselves at that point. But like kids, you kind of lose the plot, you know, and instead of running around, you start breaking the furniture.
Now, over the years, Top Gear did make jokes about many nationalities and many countries.
And that's full of spiders. Signposts are all full of gibberish. They're all communists. Can't go there because the Americans will shoot you.
No! France is a country you have to drive through to get to Italy. That's all it's for.
Well, that's just stupid. Apart from anything else, what's the point of insuring Americans' head? There's nothing in it.
And I think most of them, you know, they're all in good spirit, all in good fun. And the joke was usually on the person who was making these jokes. They were portrayed as a fool and a bit of an imbecile for saying these things, usually Jeremy. However, in this example, yeah, I can't really defend Top Gear here. It was just three people enforcing a stereotype against a group of people. And yeah, the intended target was actually Mexicans instead of the presenters. So yeah, can't really defend this. Not one of Top Gear's brightest moments.
If you look at Partridge or David Brent, what they're doing is similar jokes. You can imagine David Brent doing the Mexican jokes, but at the same time there's a framework where they're saying, are you right to laugh at this? And with the Top Gear people, there seems to be no framework. There seems to be just a casual, blokey, let's laugh at it.
Now, when I watched this show as a kid, I didn't really notice this, but actually, rewatching the footage and going back over it, they did step over this line quite a lot of the time.
So if you're watching this in Saudi Arabia, time to break out your camel.
It's back to carpets for you.
You're not helping me now.
No, except for one tiny detail. The Koreans eat dogs. You're going to come down one morning and don't come crying to me if you find Top Gear dog in a BAP.
They are a bunch of treacherous, lamb-burning, work-shy peasants.
You can't tell, can you, that Top Gear's just been sold in Korea?
No.
Well, no, I don't think there's any evidence. I think we're smoothing this one out nicely.
It's not showing.
Hello, you industrious little fellows. They've nicked our airports, they've nicked all our fish, they've nicked all our building societies, they eat the heads off prawns, they throw donkeys off tower blocks, and they stab cows.
So that's Spanish.
That is the Spanish.
And we're off the air in Korea.
Yeah, goodbye, industrious little fellows.
As much as I love Top Gear, moments like this really make it hard to defend the show. This series also saw them convert a combine harvester into a snowplough, with a flamethrower attached of course, which you do properly have to suspend your disbelief for. People might have a different opinion on when Top Gear jumped the shark, when they went a bit too far, when things were just a little bit too unrealistic. For me, this was it. They also started to revisit ideas that they'd done before a bit too frequently. A prime example of this being when instead of taking on a German motor show, D-Motor, they took on Australian Top Gear in a series of challenges. It was still hilarious though, to be fair.
I just thought it would be nice for them to arrive back in the country the way their ancestors left. We have both these. Yours are over here. But what?
It's upside down.
Yes, but it won't be when you get home and you watch it on TV there. It'll all be the right way up.
Series 17 had some great moments. Top Gear took on a professional wrecking crew in a demolition match. If the Olympics is looking to add a new sport, bung this sport in there. They had a task where they had to build trains out of cars, which of course ends in a fire.
Even here, we're stuck behind caravans. If I'm honest though, that wasn't the most immediate problem. Oh, for God's sake! Oh, this is really bad. Oh, whoa, no, whoa. I'm very sorry about this.
Richard Hammond does a great piece on a disabled team of veterans, which sees the return of Ben Collins.
You all right then? You ready?
Yeah, very good. Looking forward to it.
Good. When you go around, don't tell him anything. You'll put it in a book. Just make sure that you'll be all right.
And during a hatchback challenge in Italy, Chaz and Dave gets mentioned.
Chaz and Dave, molto popolare inglesi.
I don't understand.
Chaz and Dave, Robson and Jerome, molto bene.
Yeah. However, despite this greatness, ratings were declining. They still did average 6.42 million viewers for the series, but their days of averaging over 7 million viewers a series, they were over. And this perhaps wasn't helped by an appearance Jeremy Clarkson made on The One Show.
Now, at the end of a day when Britain has seen the biggest strikes in a generation, what we need is someone calm and level-headed.
Yeah, a guest with balanced, uncontroversial opinions who makes great efforts not to offend.
And we've got Jeremy Clarkson.
Now, at the time, there was a rail strike, and before going on air, someone at the BBC asked Clarkson to give a balanced view.
This was a classic BBC moment, and it came out of a sort of crazy thing the BBC was doing at the time, which is to say, if you give any political views, you must balance them. Not saying that to presenters, they were saying it to guests. So you can see backstage, Clarkson has to sign this thing, and he says, "What am I signing?"
So when Clarkson went on the show, he started off with a positive opinion of the strikes.
Do you think the strikes have been a good idea?
Fantastic. Absolutely. Never had. London today has just been empty.
Then to balance it up, he said this.
We have to balance it though, don't we? Because this is the BBC.
I thought, oh no, don't, whatever happens, Alex, Matt, don't say, yes, you do.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Frankly, I'd have them all shot. I would take them outside and execute them in front of their families. I mean, how dare they go on strike when they've got these gilt-edged pensions that are going to be guaranteed while the rest of us have to work for a living?
Yeah. Well, on that note of balancing an opinion, of course, those are Jeremy's views.
It made an absolute mockery of whoever it was that was trying to get guests to sign something saying they would always give balanced views. Why on earth was the BBC doing that?
As you can imagine, the quote of him saying that he thinks strikers should be shot was taken out of context. They disregarded the point he was trying to make. This attracted 32,000 complaints to Ofcom. And yeah, not the best promotion for the next series of Top Gear.
For that time of day, what Clarkson said on the One Show really upset a lot of people.
I think they're outrageous, and Jeremy Clarkson should apologise for those comments.
Series 18 started with their longest special yet, as they tried a different spin on their traditional cross-country road trip format. They did still travel across a country, which in this instance was India, but instead they decided to do it under the guise of a British trade mission to promote British goods and services to the Indian market. This special even featured a cameo from David Cameron. Ah, that's how he got David Cameron to be in it. They were mates. Yeah.
Well, that was unequivocal.
For this special, they were set the task of buying a British car for under 7,000 quid that would best represent Britain. And I do like the fact that they were trying to change up the format of these specials, but this change didn't really work. The traditional road trips had a great flow, with the challenges set up by the producer seamlessly weaving their way into the episode. Whereas here, the presenters came up with their own standalone challenges, and it didn't really flow as well. The traditional road trips felt a bit like a road movie, with a narrative going all the way through it, whereas this felt like a really long sketch show. As previously mentioned, Top Gear had long faced criticism for their overly scripted segments. However, I personally never really agreed with the criticism. But again, here there were some jokes that did stretch my ability to suspend my disbelief a bit too much. This is another example of where many fans felt Top Gear jumped the shark.
Strangely, the guests took this massive explosion as a cue to leave.
Metaphorically, of course. Literally jumping over a shark might have saved the special. However, it wasn't just in the department of creativity that the show was facing criticism. They also garnered accusations of racism.
Let's quickly move on. It's one of the most popular shows on earth. Top Gear on BBC, ostensibly a show about cars, but often a show on just about everything else. And that's what's got a lot of people irritated after Top Gear came to India to shoot their Christmas special.
Now, I personally don't think the Top Gear presenters are racist, but yeah, I can see why people would take issue with this special.
I tell you what's better, why don't we change the word? None! Hey, none, 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 na 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 na.
Which did the trick.
To make things even worse, the presenters ended up mounting their cars on a sacred burial ground. And the special's credits were a bit regrettable. Anyone who was calling for Top Gear to be cancelled was handed a fuckload of ammunition with this special. The High Commission of India even complained about this show.
They project themselves as ambassadors of UK on some kind of a trade mission, but I think if this is the kind of envoy that Britain wishes to send out, they really should do a rethink any more than they would wish to send out football hooligans.
But despite the negative press, the season would press ahead, and the series was pretty good.
A stranger in the black sedan, won't you hop inside my car? I got pictures, got candy, I'm a lovable man, and I can take you to the nearest star. I'm your vehicle, baby, I'll take you anywhere you wanna go. I'm your vehicle, woman, by now I'm sure you know that I love you, I need you, I want you, got to have your child. Great God in heaven, you know I love.
Actually, thinking about it, this was a great series. However, despite the show's consistent quality, the series average was down again, this time to 6.07 million. However, on the positive side, that year would see Clarkson, Hammond and May sign a new 3-year deal with the BBC. Also, Clarkson and Willman sold their stake in Better 6 to the BBC, so as part of the new deal, Hammond and May would also get a slice of the revenue generated from the show's merchandise. Series 19 saw the ratings rise once again as we got a fantastic season. Clarkson invented his own car, the P45, and pitched it on Dragon's Den.
What would it cost to have one of these on the road?
£8,000.
£8,000. What would you make them for?
It'll cost £4,000 to build.
By children, or are you going to get adults?
Can you really get children to work in a factory? Because that would be brilliant if you could.
Jeremy has asked if he could get children to work in a factory.
Well, Jeremy, I'm the last dragon in, and I tried to tempt him by making an offer, hoping they would come in with me.
So I can't understand a word you're saying.
They did another USA road trip. Clarkson reviewed a Toyota and a Subaru. Well, that's just a bog standard track test, actually, no need to remember that. We got car rugby at Twickenham with BBC score graphics. James and Richard finally beat Jeremy Clarkson in one of the epic races. Clarkson and Hammond designed a car for elderly people.
Well, you know, you're always reading in the newspapers about an old person who's driven 30 miles the wrong way down the M1.
Yeah.
Well, I fitted something that'll stop that happening.
Oh, I see. That's clever. That's good. But if I miss the signs, I could just as easily miss all this.
Yeah, OK, keep going.
Oh, this is going to be... Oh.
Keep going.
And for their special, it would again be split into two parts as they travelled Central Africa trying to find the true source of the River Nile. In the process of doing this, they would spend the special stealing bits off each other's cars. That's not the actual source of the Nile, by the way, it's still disputed. In April of 2013, the BBC appointed Danny Cohen as Director of Television, meaning he was in control of all 4 BBC channels. Danny was dubbed the ultimate lefty. He was a champion of political correctness and he wanted to make the BBC more diverse. He was a company man who didn't want to speak bad of the corporation. He was basically the complete opposite of Jeremy Clarkson. Him in power was not good news for the show. For Series 20, we would get a new star in a reasonably priced car, and it would be the Dacia Sandero. Well, originally it was going to be, however, due to the economy, Renault U-turned on their decision to launch a Dacia Sandero in the UK, so Top Gear instead opted for a Vauxhall Astra. As we had a new car, it meant we got another invitational star in a reasonably priced car. And once again, it was quality.
Do we have a jack? I think we can use... Warwick, you can lift things, right? I don't know what superpowers you people have, but can you lift it?
Other highlights from the series included them trying to build a hovercraft, well, a hover van, James and Jeremy becoming caravanists, which involved a great running gag with them throwing things in the tip.
Having declared the Tiguan the victor by default, we took the Stig to the tip and threw him away.
It also saw them wind up in a dogging park. Series 20 was fantastic, and that year in 2013, Top Gear would also make it in to the Guinness Book of World Records for being the most watched TV show in the world, being watched by 350 million people in more than 200 countries. The next series, Series 21, was also great. They had a challenge to prove hatchbacks of their youth were better than modern day hatchbacks. This was Top Gear silliness at its best, especially the end with the Top Gear police force trying to destroy each other. Jeremy and James were tasked with making a public information film to keep cyclists safe, so they decided to become cyclists.
Christ on a bike!
Cyclists, red and green. Learn the bloody difference.
And on a road trip in Ukraine, they ended up having to do the opposite of a fuel economy challenge and run out of petrol before they arrived in their destination, which they would have to go in if they didn't run out of fuel. And that destination was Chernobyl. By the way, Apparently, it wasn't actually as bad as it's made to look on the show. That radiation meter thing, that was fabricated. Apparently, you can actually go on tours of Chernobyl. I don't know if you'd find those tours on Thomas Cook, but whatever.
You know, we've always been brought up to think that nuclear's really scary. But is it? I mean, 28 years after the worst possible disaster, and I was wandering around in jeans and training shoes, and you think, I know I'm supposed to have thrown my shoes away, but I haven't.
The series culminated in the two-part Burma Special, where they had to take lorries across Burma into Thailand to build a bridge over the River Kwai and cross it with their lorries. Well, it turned out to be the River Kok.
You see, this is why you're no longer of any use to anybody, because of fuel. Yes, you see, cars are better than you. Look what I have.
Well done. What's with the plastic flowers?
It's a road safety thing. If you have a horse with diesel on it, you have to have him in front of you.
Oh, I see. Did you think to get a plastic funnel?
Yep.
Did you?
Yep. Hold that.
The special, as you can imagine, was great. One of the best bits being when they were invited to a party held by rival sides in a civil war after those sides agreed to a ceasefire. I mean, if Clarkson, May and Hammond don't make you want to have peace on Earth, I don't know what will. So they went to the party and ended up getting absolutely smashed, even the crew. It was brilliant. The climax of the special sees them get to the River Kok, where Clarkson parodies bridge over the River Kwai.
Well, I'm an officer.
Who says you're an officer?
I am. I'm the Alec Guinness figure here. It's obvious.
Because you've
Come
got
along,
a
chaps.
stick.
That stick may disappear quite soon.
And they eventually do build the bridge. And it was when assessing their work that Hammond and Clarkson stood back and made this joke.
That is a proud moment. But there's a slope on it.
You're right. It's definitely higher on that side.
Now at the time, I didn't even know it was a joke. However, it turns out that slope is also a derogatory term that refers to Asians that dates back to 1984. My words, digging in the crates for that offence there, Jesus. This joke got Top Gear in trouble, as actress, the name's on the screen, not going to try and pronounce it, she's been in the bill. She took offence to this joke and asked law firm Equal Justice to sue the BBC. They got Lawrence Davis, the lawyer who represented viewers in the Celebrity Big Brother 5 racism row, and the BBC were facing damages of £1 million, with the actress wanting an apology and the BBC to fully censor the show so no other ethnicity would be offended. They would take this complaint to Ofcom, and Ofcom ruled against the show, as they ruled that the BBC breached broadcasting rules by including an offensive racial term in Top Gear, which was not justified by context. Equal Justice even wrote to ambassadors and President Obama. And to be honest with you, as much as I love to give Top Gear the benefit of the doubt, I agree with the offended parties in this instance. The BBC had long been, and to this day still continues to be, accused of being imperialist. And this whole saga added a lot of fuel to that fire. Pun intended. What really didn't help was that while this was happening, Jeremy Clarkson and the show were involved in perhaps an even bigger controversy. As in May, a tape was leaked consisting of outtakes of one of Jeremy Clarkson's road tests, during which he was comparing the Toyota GT86 and the Subaru BRZ. When deciding which one to drive, he referred to an old nursery rhyme. A very, very old nursery rhyme. A nursery rhyme from a different time. And the original nursery rhyme contains a very offensive word starting with N. I think you can imagine what that is. Now, Jeremy Clarkson claims that he tried to censor himself and that he didn't say the N-word, which I have no reason to disbelieve. In the outtake, you can hear Clarkson mumbling over the offensive bit. However, when you watch it, it's hard to tell if he actually says the word or not.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. When he squeals, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
It's like that blue-yellow dress situation thing. If this was the Premier League, it wouldn't be clear and obvious. Now, on the day of recording, after Jeremy had done that take, he was made aware that it sounded like he used a certain slur, so he substituted that word for the word teacher. Again, pun intended.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a teacher by his toe. When he squeals, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
So no harm, no foul. No need to cue the Curb Your Enthusiasm music. The unoffensive version wouldn't air on TV. But then the footage was leaked. And now Clarkson was in trouble. Now, as I said before, when Clarkson or the show would get in trouble, there usually wouldn't be an apology. However, this time, that wasn't going to fly.
Please be assured I did everything in my power to not use that word. And that I'm sitting here begging your forgiveness for the fact that obviously my efforts weren't quite good enough. Thank you.
But even a public apology by Clarkson couldn't stem the tide of the deep shit that Jeremy and the show were in. The calls for the show to be cancelled and Clarkson to be sacked were now more ferocious than ever. All of this came at the worst possible time for Clarkson, as he was mourning the death of his mother who had just passed away. Despite requests to be left alone, the BBC wouldn't adhere to them, further souring the relationship between Clarkson and the corporation. Jeremy was summoned to the BBC's headquarters in London, where his fate would be decided in a meeting with BBC Director General Tony Hall and BBC Director of Television Danny Cohen. I don't know what either of these job titles mean either. Danny, as I mentioned, wasn't Clarkson's biggest fan, and he wanted to launch disciplinary action against Jeremy, which would most likely see him fired. I mean, before this incident, he told Clarkson off for sending out a social media post where he called his dog Didier Dogba. So when it came to this situation, he needed no excuse to try and get rid of Clarkson. However, another one of Tony Hall's nebulous job titles was as a non-executive director of BBC Worldwide. Again, no idea what that means, but I do know that BBC Worldwide is the commercial wing of the BBC, and Top Gear made them a fortune. So Tony said, "Nah mate, Clarkson's staying," and he ruled against Danny. As a compromise, he gave Clarkson a final warning, and Danny ordered an internal investigation into the show.
The guy in charge of the BBC, the TV, said, right, I want an investigation into their office, their practices, their working practices.
Beginning in June, a 4 to 6 week investigation into the show took place. It examined if workers on the show thought Top Gear was racist, if they thought Jeremy Clarkson was racist, and whether a culture existed where people were afraid to speak out when they found things offensive.
So I was like, okay, wankers, fill your boots, and I was very aggressive.
Among those to be interviewed were Clarkson's closest friends and colleagues, Hammond, May and Willman.
This guy came in and he interviewed everybody, and he gave us a glowing report, because we actually are, at that time, we were a very dysfunctional family, but we are a family.
Yeah.
Ofcom ruled against the BBC, saying that they breached broadcasting rules in regards to the Burma Special. Top Gear did skate on the N-word footage, as it was never included in the broadcast, and the BBC Trust ultimately took no further action. Top Gear, now more than ever, just needed to get back to making good, entertaining programming and keep out of the spotlight for a bit. what better opportunity to get some positive press for the show and remind everyone why they fell in love with it than with one of their epic specials. In the spring of 2014, when they were planning for the next special, they were originally going to follow the Silk Road to China, which would have been epic. However, this was seen as too long of a journey, so they instead decided to go to South America, to be more specific, Patagonia, a region covered by Chile and Argentina. And yeah, it didn't go well.
Who are those guys?
Top Gear Patagonia Special coming soon, only on BBC Two and BBC Two HD.
This was over 3 decades on from the Falklands War. In England, the conflict wasn't really in the public consciousness. Surely the war, which didn't last that long, wasn't still a sore spot for Argentinians. Well, before any filming would take place, a few members of the production went over to Argentina to do a local recce, the lucky bastards. And while they're on their taxpayer-funded jolly up, they found out, yeah, the Falklands isn't something that you can joke about over there. But you know, that's one of the things these location recce's are for. Good they checked, no harm, no foul.
And I remember talking to Jeremy about it, and I went, so, you're happy we don't do any shenanigans? He was like, we just can't. Like, I think he'd had it impressed on him how dangerous it was out there if we mucked around.
For this 2-part Christmas special, Top Gear would be celebrating the 60th anniversary of the small block V8 engine, and celebrating durable coats as well, presumably. They would be set the challenge of driving 1,600 miles to the Ushuaia, the capital of Tierra del Fuego, the City of Fire. This is the most southerly city in the world. When they arrived, they would help build a football stadium and take on an Argentinian team in a game of car football, dubbed the End of the World Cup. This location was also the port where the Argentinian battleship the Belgrano sailed from at the start of the Falklands War, before the British sunk it, resulting in the loss of 323 lives. So this was not a location the British were particularly popular in. All 3 presenters were tasked with selecting a car with a V8 engine. Richard selects a Ford Mustang Mach-1, James selects a Lotus Esprit V8, and Jeremy chose the Porsche 928 GT for a very sentimental reason. This was the car that allowed him to drive to the hospital quickly enough to see his dad before he passed away. Now, Jeremy's car was incredibly rare. The researchers could only find 2 available.
The car, because we went back and looked at the ad, the plates were blanked out in the ad. The car was inspected by a Porsche mechanic. He went, yeah, it's good, at the seller's house. And then it was stuck on a truck, into a crate, across the Atlantic, because otherwise it wouldn't be there in time.
So no one saw it?
No one from the production saw it. And even when they did, they kind of went, oh, it's a nice car, that. And it wasn't until someone online went, oh, look, Top Gear in town, and they've got this comedy plate on the car. But that had been on the car since it was registered new in whenever it was, 91. So we would have had to track that car down. And then, luckily, it was for sale, which, of course, is impossible, because how would you... Or we'd have had to retro-engineer it, gone, oh, look, there's a car for sale with an inflammatory Argentinian number plate. Let's go to Argentina with it, which would have been a really cock-assed way of doing things.
So on the 17th of September, the Top Gear team arrived in Buenos Aires, Argentina. 2 days later, filming was set to begin in the city of Bariloche. And on that day, the 19th of September, is when a photographer from the car magazine Autoblog Argentina was sent to the hotel Clarkson, May and Hammond were staying at, and he was told to find out anything he could about this Top Gear shoot. The photographer took a picture of Clarkson's Porsche. The man who took the picture was Carlos Cristofola. Carlos Cristofola, a journalist for Autoblog Argentina, tweeted the picture with the text, Top Gear Argentina has begun its ironies. The Porsche that @Jeremy Clarkson is driving through Patagonia. Anyone else? Read 1928 Falklands. Well, they tweeted it in Spanish. So when scrolling through Twitter, Clarkson noticed the tweet, selected Google Translate, I presume, or maybe he might know Spanish, I don't know. Anyway, he noticed the tweet and he was concerned. He thought this might be an issue. This is where the team were made aware of how the number plate could be interpreted as a Falklands War dig. Clarkson's genuine surprise was witnessed by a mechanic. And to be honest, I have no reason to disbelieve them. If someone didn't spell it out for me, I would not think of the Falklands when I looked at that number plate.
You don't have to stretch that far to make a connection.
And the year as well. And
the year as well, 82.
It says 982. It doesn't say 1982.
Yeah.
Everybody's saying that because it's been pointed out to
Yeah.
them. That's called curved thinking or whatever it is.
Someone from the Top Gear office spoke with the local authorities in Ushuaia, and the Top Gear team decided that before they would get to Tierra del Fuego, they would replace the number plate. To fit this in to the diegesis of the episode, yeah ladies, it's the kind of vocabulary I have. A replacement number plate was made up which would spell out Bell End. Someone from the Top Gear office was then going to fly it out to the team in Argentina. This comedy number plate would be used on Jeremy's car for the planned climax of the programme, the game of car football. As to why they couldn't just change the plates right there and then, well, falsifying, altering or suppressing the number of a plate in Argentina can be punished with prison sentences of between 6 months and 3 years. So I can imagine the team, they just hoped this tweet wouldn't catch too much attention and they could swap out the number plate for the game of car football and no one would be any the wiser. So they pushed on, and filming that day went well. They visited the cabin where the famous outlaws Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid stayed back in 1901. Clarkson parodied the film, which would be a running gag throughout the special. And it was at this cabin that they were given their real task. You know, driving 1,600 miles and setting up the football stadium and all that. So they set off on their journey to Ushuaia. Their plan was to drive along the famous Route 40, one of the longest routes in South America and one of the longest in the world. However, the Argentina's National Parks Authority reportedly wanted to charge the team for filming along certain sections of the route, so they decided to cross into Chile. In the show, Clarkson proposed this idea as a way of crossing the Andes in the easiest possible way. So after making fun of Hammond appearing to sodomise his car, getting a cameo from Terry Funk's Argentinian cousin, driving on some very rough terrain, they arrived in Chile. And this is where the British press started to report on Top Gear's Argentina shoot. Nevertheless, the lads carried on with their hijinks.
That is a proud moment, Hammond, but is it straight?
Yes. Yes.
James May injured his back when he was thrown off a horse, which wasn't good. They modified their cars, they bought presents for each other in normal Top Gear fashion. All the while, they were being reported on by a local newspaper, El Periódico Austral. Hammond, Clarkson and May crossed between Argentina and Chile several times on this trip, and on the 23rd of September, they took a ferry from Punta Arenas in Chile to Argentina, where they would enter a shitstorm. With their arrival in Ushuaia looming, the number plate on Jeremy's car was changed to H1VAE. This was a number plate that wasn't registered to Jeremy's car, but instead registered to a white 2006 Porsche, making them in violation of the law. On the 2nd of October, they would finally arrive in Ushuaia, or the 23rd of September, according to the Telegraph. I don't know, the day doesn't really make much of a difference to what's about to happen. Upon arrival in Ushuaia, a local radio station reported that the Top Gear team had come to deliberately provoke the Argentinians. Various rumours spread among the locals as to how exactly they were doing this. That they had English flags on their cars, that their plates read "fuck you," that they had bumper stickers saying Maradona's a knob, all kinds of heinous stuff. the 40-strong crew booked into a hotel in the Arkur Ushuaia ski resort. Gary Lineker was even set to join the English team in the game of car football. After a successful day of filming at the ski resort Cerro Castor, 10 miles from Ushuaia, a group of local protesters gathered at the Arkur Hotel and told the Top Gear crew that a local trucking union were coming to sort them out, and that they should get out of Argentina. This made the Top Gear team lock themselves away in their hotel, with Hammond, Clarkson and May in particular staying out of sight from the local protesters who descended on the hotel. Clarkson has even said that he hid underneath his own bed. I'm not sure they make beds that big, to be honest, but never mind. Police came to try and defuse the situation. However, the number of the protesters increased, so the police urged the crew to leave as they couldn't guarantee their safety. Gary Lineker was told at Heathrow not to get on the plane for Argentina and stay away from social media while you're at it. It's not worth it. The crowd of angry Argentinians increased, which included war veterans who, according to Clarkson, were in their 20s. So, you know, probably pretty handy. And this mob was trying to get into the hotel. Mariano Plessity, the local government representative, a very unspecific shit-sounding job title, negotiated with the mob. The Top Gear team feared for their lives, as they wondered how big could this mob get? Would they start getting violent? Did that horse throw James off deliberately, the shifty bastard? What was going to happen? At this point they were 3 days away from filming being completed. But due to the circumstances, the shoot was cut short and the game was abandoned, which is the standard level of organisation for most South American football tournaments. Fearing that the Argentine mob were developing into a tasty little firm, Mariano and his team reserved 13 seats on an Aeroline Argentina's flight to leave Ushuaia for Buenos Aires at 7:30 p.m. that day. So Clarkson, May, Hammond, a producer, and the females on the crew left on the plane. I mean, rocks hurt blokes too, just to let you know. They scarpered so quickly out of the service door, they left the laptop behind. They got on the plane to Buenos Aires.
Yeah. And we thought, well, that'll draw the fire. That's all they're after, our stupid, ugly mugs off the telly, because the insult is perceived as, you know, well, we're the face of it.
Yeah.
But we got to the airport and zipped off, but then the crew were hounded.
No.
Chased by them.
Oh, no.
They set up roadblocks. And there's this, you know, 23-year-old researchers and camera assistants and camera operators in the cars for, I think, 58 hours they were on the run.
The remaining 15 to 20 person production crew, or 31 persons according to the programme, a lot of people basically, they packed away the 4 tons of equipment and, accompanied by a police escort, they headed for the Chilean border as nightfall descended onto the convoy.
Mutiny. I mean, obviously Argentina was a really fractious moment. That was the one moment when the crew were looking at me going, did you really do that number plate, genuinely? Because we're about to get our fucking heads kicked in and our lives are going to be in danger, we know that. All for a silly joke you did. And I was like, we did not do that number plate.
Come on.
To this fucking day, until the day I die.
Come on.
On my children.
80 miles out of Ushuaia, they reached the town of Tulum, where a group of protesters blocked the convoy by placing a lorry across 2 lanes of traffic.
There's a truck slowing us down too.
The truck blocking the right-hand lane?
It's too slow, that's a deliberate truck just put there.
They're coming out.
Getting things thrown at me now.
The protesters then pelted them with eggs, rocks, bricks, bottles, and according to Jeremy, pickaxe handles. It sounds awful, but you know, at least they left out the sharp bit. That was nice of them.
We had a guy called Bob Ives, and he was the one who found a route that would take us across country over a river so that we didn't have to go into the next town, where I don't believe all of us would have come out alive.
We've had our driver window smashed in on B. Starting through the side window. I've been hit, but I'm okay.
On their route to the Chilean border, they had to go through the city of Rio Grande. However, the crew were informed that an ambush was waiting for them there.
The next town was this town called Rio Grande, and like the police with us said, there's 500 cars waiting for you. And it was different roads, different, you'd never, ever have kept a convoy together.
It was at this point they decided to ditch the presenters' cars. I personally don't know why they still had the cars. I mean, I'm a cheap bastard myself, but even I don't think those cars would be worth the hassle.
Yeah, can we get on the phone to an embassy? Negative. We've not got any signal on our sat phone. We're still trying.
I sort of got on the radio and made a joke about, I hope everybody's okay about not having overtime. But there was just, and I thought, that's funny.
Yeah, that is funny.
And there's just total silence on the radio.
No.
The silence was like, shut up, you prick.
The protesters attempted to herd the crew into Rio Grande, but as a diversion, the police instead headed to Rio Grande and the crew headed for the river border. And when they got to the river border, it was closed, so they had to cut through the fence illegally. So after they forded a river, despite suffering a few injuries, the crew managed to arrive in Chile and escape from Argentina. And I learned a new word.
Let us live in peace.
We all stuck together, we all did it together, we got them out, and they believed us the truth about that number plate. I think if it had been discovered that we had done that number plate delivery, nobody would have worked with us again.
While setting out to imitate Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, life had imitated art. That was actually imitating real life in the first place. Whatever. Basically, they decided to end the special in the most fitting way that they could by parodying the end of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which actually proved to be quite a nice ending. Once again, Top Gear had caused a diplomatic incident. Clarkson gave statements saying he was convinced that the team's problems were caused by local politicians wanting to create political capital ahead of local elections. He believed the mob was state organised. He also said that they were told to leave the country, which conflicts with Mariano Plessiti's account of events, saying that the Top Gear team were advised to leave the country. But I think what everyone really wanted to know was, did Top Gear do this on purpose? To my knowledge, everyone involved with the show still claims that this was just an accident. And to be honest, I believed them. However, a lot of people didn't believe that this was an accident, and this was used as another stick to beat the show with. Today, whether the number plates were an accident or not is still debated. And on this occasion, the BBC took Top Gear's side, and on the 31st of October, when the Argentine ambassador Alicia Castro had a meeting with Danny Cohen, she demanded an apology and Danny refused. Yeah, every geese has its day. The show went out at Christmas as planned, and in January the show would be back for its 22nd series. The series would be the first time that the show would air simultaneously all around the world. To preview the series, there was an hour-long evening with Top Gear to give fans a little taste of what was to come. This series would consist of a longer than usual 10 episodes. However, at the time of the evening with Top Gear, they were still working on the 8th episode, which turned out to be all the episodes that you'd need actually. However, the incomplete state of the series speaks to the heavy workload the Top Gear team were under. Between Top Gear's intense filming schedule, the Top Gear live tour, and the work that Clarkson, May and Hammond did away from the show, the presenters were incredibly burned out. In particular, Jeremy Clarkson, who perhaps took on the heaviest workload of anyone on Top Gear. Added on to that was the stress of Clarkson's personal life. As previously mentioned, he was still grieving the death of his mother. All the while, his marriage to second wife and business partner Frances was coming to an end. This resulted in Jeremy losing his £2.5 million country home in Chipping Norton, and reportedly having to pay out £10 million. Don't get married, geezers. Don't do it. Clarkson was going through so much stress that he even made up with Piers Morgan. Fuck me, when you haven't even got the drive to hate that prick, you must be going through a hard time. At the best of times, Clarkson isn't known for being the most zen person, and by all accounts, that's how you could describe the atmosphere on the show. Although it was still a fun place to work, reportedly, over the years the atmosphere got a bit more tense as the show went on.
The atmosphere at the show was definitely changing. I noticed that we used to have the crowd used to come to the track, and they would go to the studio and all that sort of stuff. And James is always brilliant. James May used to go out, make everybody tea, hand out biscuits. And then, as the popularity grew, then some security guards appeared, and then tensor barriers appeared. And it was becoming this very, I don't know what you call that, but it was different.
Corporate conglomerate.
More corporate, and there was more of an edge to things. There was just some of the fun had vanished a little bit.
Yeah, being knackered and shouted at. That's the other thing, is like, what's it like to work on Top Gear? It's basically
tiring,
being shattered the entire time, and
unfed.
and then being shouted at.
The many clouds that were hanging over the show seemed to be forming into a storm that was about to strike. However, at the time, I wasn't aware of any of this. I was at uni at the time, so I wasn't aware of much, to be fair. When the show was going out, I was just enjoying what a great series that this was. The series immediately opened up with loads of references to the whole drama that happened in Patagonia.
But I want to get it off my chest now. Right in the middle of the programme, I said that the condor is the largest flying bird in the world. It isn't. It's the wandering albatross, and I'm deeply, deeply sorry.
Oh, well done for getting that off your chest. Well done. You feel better?
Oh, God, James, what have you done?
What's he done? What?
As we know, there is a strong Republican movement in this country, people who think it's ridiculous to have a head of state living in London on the other side of the world. He turns up here with that on the number plate.
What?
Can you not see that? It's obvious.
No.
Charles and Camilla. You've done it on purpose, haven't you, James?
No, look, let me explain.
Blithering idiot.
You idiot!
Oh, no! Mine
And you
says big royalist.
It does!
It totally does. You
Big
can see
royalist. Luckily, mine just says BMW 001 because I covered myself on this occasion.
No, you idiot. Bloody Mrs. Windsor.
Oh, no! Bloody Mrs. Windsor!
Trouble now.
They had a great race to find the fastest way to cross St. Petersburg. The lads went on an Australian road trip where Clarkson kept their campsite safe with the help of claymores.
What was that?
Oh, that was the sound of me saving your life.
They have a go at building their own ambulances, which is one of my all-time favourite challenges. Richard tests out a distress beacon up a mountain in Canada, with the distress signal being sent to Clarkson and May in London. And as you can imagine, they didn't rush to save Hammond.
Crikey, actually that is quite serious. We really do need to get on this, James. So, excuse me, could we see the pudding menu?
But for the film to work, I had to be, really cross. But the fact of the matter is, I'd pitched my tent, I'd built myself a little bivouac round a tree. My wife had given me a bottle of her homemade sloe gin. It went dark at 2:30. The crew couldn't do any more filming, so they all went off on snowmobiles down the hill to a big tent and left me on my own with my little fire by my tree, my bottle of gin and a book. I'd have stayed there for months. I'd still be there. I've never been happier. But on camera, I had to be really, really angry, which was a lie. I was having a lovely time.
And James enters a professional rallycross race with Hammond and Clarkson as his spotters.
What time have you got to go tonight?
Well, I just want to beat the traffic.
Which bit of the M4 do you go down?
Off at junction 15.
That is near the M5, isn't it?
No, 17 is Skippenham.
It's Bristol.
Shut up, you two!
And then, well, the series took a bit of a turn. So on the 4th of March, Hammond, Clarkson and May filmed studio segments for episode 7 of the series. Then that same day, they travelled to Simonstone Hall Hotel in Hawes, North Yorkshire for a feature that was scheduled to appear in episode 10. It's not been confirmed what this feature would be, but I reckon it was probably a road trip. So the trio arrived at the hotel and allegedly some drinking had been taking place. 2 days prior to this, Clarkson had been told by his doctor that the lump on his tongue might be cancer. So Clarkson was not in the best headspace.
Jeremy Clarkson come through and said, any chance of a selfie, Jeremy? And he says, no, not what day that I've had today. So I more or less sat down with my tail between my legs.
After a busy day of filming, an unsober Clarkson wanted to get some grub. However, the kitchen was closed, the chefs had gone home, and Uber Eats still didn't exist in the UK, so Clarkson was mad. He was hangry. He wanted hot food. Reportedly, he wanted a steak. Producer Oisin Timon was in charge of catering, and he was therefore the target of Clarkson's anger. And on the patio of the hotel, Oisin informed Clarkson that there was no hot food.
Within minutes, they say, Clarkson directed a torrent of 4-letter abuse at a colleague.
He hadn't done his job properly. It was ridiculous that there was nothing to eat, and that he would... Obviously, there's lots of expletives in between all this, and that he would be losing his job. He would see to it that he would lose his job.
And then he physically assaulted him by punching him in the face.
The BBC says it has suspended the Top Gear host Jeremy Clarkson following a fracas with a producer.
And that was enough. That was enough for them to say, right, we're calling time on you.
Cheers for watching, geezers. I know it's been a long one. If you've got this far, you can probably tell how much time and energy has gone into making this video. And you can probably tell the amount of copyright strikes I'm going to get. So I'm not going to be making any money off the AdSense. So if you could donate to Patreon, it would be a massive help. The link's in the description. I know the economy's been shite at the moment, so if you can't, I understand as well, no problem. But I would massively appreciate it. It would help me to continue making more of these videos and mean that I don't have to have reduced stickers on everything I give to the trick-or-treaters this year. Anyway, I'll see you in part 4, where I cover the most recent incarnation of Top Gear. You also get to see the videos as they are intended to be seen before I had to change things due to copyright and all that bollocks. Also, you get to see my top 11 porn stars in politics video, which is pretty good. Anyway, I'll see you in part 4, where I'll cover the most recent incarnation of Top Gear. If that doesn't deserve any Patreon donations, I don't know what does. Oh, it's going to be brutal. Anyway, cheers for watching, geezers. See you later.